Hi everybody, Jane here, and today we are going to do my April 2019 wrap-up. This has actually been a crazy reading month for me, not in a good way, I think. I don't feel like it's been great, actually. I DNF'd 3 books. I had 4 3-star reads, including one that I was so excited about, and it just really disappointed me. I had 1 4-star read and 1 5-star read. And kind of one of the things that wasn't great about that is I really need to keep up with my Goodreads 8 books read per month, and I didn't quite finish that many. I'm not counting the DNF, so I'm a little behind now. Well, I potentially could be behind. My Goodreads, I think I was a little ahead last month, but I haven't finished inputting everything into the computer, so I'll probably be like right on track to get my 100 books finished this month or this year. See what happens. But anyway, yeah, this was not a great reading month. I really was kind of disappointed. So I'm going to start off by talking to you about the books that I DNF'd. And the first one I DNF'd was Kiss Me at Willoughby Close. This was my Kindle pick, and I didn't get very far into it. I don't even think I got 10% into it. Basically, it is about a woman named Ava, and she is really recently, like not even a month recently, widowed. And she learns that her husband has left his fortune to his children. He's given her like $10,000 and a dog and a car, I think, and basically said, go make your way in the world. And she does not know what to do. And so she goes and rents this little cottage, and at some point apparently she's going to fall in love with the groundskeeper, but I didn't get that far in the story. So basically I stopped reading because I did not like Ava. I'm a go-getter, so I don't have a lot of sympathy for a woman who's like, oh no, my husband died and left me no money, what will I do? And that was kind of how I felt like Ava was. There was also a couple other things in the book that I really was kind of creeped out by, like her husband has been dead for less than a month, probably significantly less than a month, and she meets the caregiver of the land, of the grounds of this cottage, and she's all like, oh, he's hot. And I was like, your husband's body is not even cold. And mind you, we kind of get the impression that she's a bit of a gold digger and that's how she ended up with the husband she had, but still, like, respect for the dead. You tell us that you loved him, that you cared about him, that it was real. You shouldn't be checking out the caregiver. You should be in mourning. Then there was just some other creepy stuff, like she's always sure that the guys, including her stepson, are checking her out, and it made me really uncomfortable. So I ended up DNFing that. That one just didn't get to be read. My second DNF of the month was Guest Book Ghost Stories. This was sent to me by the publisher for an honest review, and it was not for me. So, and I did mention this in Goodreads because I didn't leave a star review, but I did leave a comment. I didn't get this book. I thought I was going into it getting ghost stories, but that's not really what this book is. So it's just, I'm not sure what it is. It's maybe too artistic for me. I don't know. But okay, so like we have a poem. Then we have another poem, maybe? Then it starts. And another poem-ish thing. Then we have these pictures with descriptions of the people, but the descriptions are really vague. Let me read you this one. Peter is tall for a Filipino and thin. He wears wide wall corduroys in colors like rust, mustard, and moss. His hips are broad, and when seated in a chair, he crosses his legs at the knees. He likes ketchup on most foods. He has big ears and hands. His skin is the color of wet sand. Peter is methodical. He is the one who keeps her safe. I don't know who her is. He is the one who loves her and reassures her. He can be heard as the murmur of company in the living room. So I guess that's kind of like a ghost story, but that's really the extent of it. It's not, it's like, here's a picture of this person and a little bit of details. And then you have that for a few pages. And then you have a strange little story here that I didn't really get. And I mean, that's just kind of the book. It's just, it's not what I was expecting, and I don't get it. I don't get it. So I did DNF it. I decided that was not what I was going for, and it was just not for me. All right. And my final DNF was sent to me by the author for an honest review. And it is If Nuns Were Wives. So this is a book from a nun. And I will tell you, when I hear nun, I assume Catholic. But I believe, given the context clues, and I didn't get far enough for it to be like explained explicitly, that this is not a Catholic nun, but this is a Buddhist nun, maybe. She's in Taiwan. She's trying to live in a temple. She's going to have to get her head shaved to be a nun. Things that I didn't think were traditional Catholic nun things. So that threw me a little bit, I'm not gonna lie. But anyway, it is her experience, what she learned while trying to become a nun. She is not ultimately allowed to become a nun and goes home and meets her husband and gets married. But this is kind of the things that she learns about marriage on her journey to becoming a nun. And it just wasn't for me. I started reading it. I got, I don't know, probably not even a quarter of the way through, and just the author voice didn't work for me. The feel of the book wasn't right for me. I don't necessarily think it's a bad book. It just wasn't the right fit for me. So I'm actually going to be passing this on to a friend of mine who I think it very much will be for, and it could definitely be for you. If meditation and mindfulness and words like that just make you giddy, this is the right book. It just isn't the right book for me. There's definitely a certain group of people I think this book would really, really appeal to and would be amazing for. But it wasn't right for me. Again, nothing wrong with the book, just not for me. All right, so let's get on to the books that I actually did read this month. We're going to start with my 3-star reads. And the first 2 are books from my Kindle. The first of them is Put the Cat in the Oven Before You Describe the Kitchen. So this is a book that very lightly covers topics of creative writing. It is a good book for beginners. It is a little less useful for those who are a little more advanced in writing. I did like that it was like, here are the most important things you should know before becoming a writer and things you should be focusing on. Here's some cute little examples. They didn't drone on, which I appreciated, because sometimes books that give examples, it's just so long. But these examples were quick, they were to the point, they did what they needed to do. So I like that. I also really liked the engaging voice of the author. It was fine. It was a fine beginner's book for writers. It just wasn't anything that knocked me out of the ballpark, and especially as a more advanced writer, it's not something I felt like had a lot of super helpful advice for anybody who's been writing for long. Like, if you are just getting into the writing world and just learning how to put together a story, these are pretty good tips. Okay, they really are, and it's worth picking up. If you've been writing for a while, you probably know most of the stuff in here. So it wasn't bad, it just wasn't great. The next book was called Parkinsons, You Must Be Joking. And this is a book written by a woman who has Parkinson's. And the first part of the book is kind of her experience with Parkinson's, how she got diagnosed, how she has dealt with her diagnosis, the things she's trying to do to continue to be healthy, you know, kind of the devastation of the initial diagnosis, and then realizing that many people can still live fairly full lives with Parkinson's, and a lot about the therapies that she's doing. The second half of the book was mostly like medical tips for people with Parkinson's. So I really enjoyed the first part of the book. When I went into this, I was wanting to learn more about Parkinson's, and I really was hoping for like a memoir of somebody who had Parkinson's, and that way I could get more of a feel for the disease. And I'm a writer and I work in the medical field, so I am fascinated by diseases in general, and I really was hoping to love this. And it wasn't bad. I was a little bored during certain parts of the beginning of the memoir, and then during the back part, which was all just health related stuff, I really was less interested because, again, I don't have Parkinson's, and I hadn't picked it up realizing that this really was intended for an audience who is suffering from Parkinson's. So I think if you have Parkinson's, this book is probably a lot more for you. If you're just wanting like a memoir to learn about the disease, it maybe isn't. It was interesting, it was okay, it just, again, didn't blow me away, wasn't what I was expecting. My next 3-star of the month was The Children Act by Ian McEwan. This is about a judge who has to rule on difficult cases. And she is ruling on a teenage boy who has leukemia and needs a blood transfusion, but his family is Jehovah's Witness. So they don't want him to have the blood transfusion. He doesn't want to have the blood transfusion, but she is the one who ultimately says whether the hospital can force the blood transfusion on the child. They are in the UK, so things are done a little bit different healthcare-wise. And there is a thing called the Children Act, which she has to base all her decisions on, which is basically that she has to decide every case in what is in the best interest of the child. So she goes into this and is really focused on figuring out what to do for this kid. And then she makes her decision, and the rest of the book, she makes her decision kind of the halfway point, and this is a fairly short book, and the rest of the decision is kind of the repercussions of that decision. Now, I had seen the movie, which is why I decided to read the book in the first place, because I found the movie really confusing. The book is less confusing, but it also, I still didn't feel really very satisfied by it. A good part of the first half of the book is actually her issues with her husband and her marriage, and there's not as much focus as I would have liked on the actual case. And then the second half of the book, I felt like it just didn't, I wasn't entirely sure what the author was going for, I think. It was okay. I did a full review on this. If you're interested, it's going to be up maybe later this month. If you like stories about, or if you like books that make you think about right and wrong, this is an interesting one. This is an interesting, should we supersede people's religious beliefs or not to save a life? Can a 17-year-old decide that his beliefs in God are enough to die for? And can the law allow that if he's only 17? So there was some really good questions asked in this book. It was okay. I didn't love the author's writing style. It was a little bit dense, and I do have another book on my shelf by this author, so I'm a little hesitant now to get to it. But it wasn't bad. It wasn't amazing. It was just okay. The next book that was a 3-star for me, and oh my gosh, this was my most disappointing book of the month because it was really hyped, and I thought I was gonna love it. I thought it was gonna be an easy 4-star and maybe a 5-star. And it wasn't. This is another 3-star for me, and that was My Lovely Wife. So this book is about a couple who kill people together. Sort of. So it's hard not to give too much away since this is a thriller. But basically we have the story told by the male of the couple, the husband, and his job is to go out and find women for his wife to kill. And he does this by pretending that he's deaf and getting to know women that way. And then he comes back and sort of tells his wife who they should and shouldn't target. And that is not a very complete synopsis of what happens, but that's the most I can do without really spoiling much of the book. Here are the things that I didn't like about it, and I'm going to be doing a full review with spoilers if you really want more details of like what didn't work, but I'm going to try to be vague. And actually, let me start with what did work. I think that'll work better. So I loved his attempting to be deaf, the scenes where he's playing a deaf person to try to seduce these women. I was kind of interested in that. That was pretty cool. I was fascinated by the family dynamics. This man and wife have 2 children at home, and at one point, some of their murders affect their daughter. Not directly, but just, hearing that there's missing people on the news, she gets upset by it. And, how they deal with her, how he feels about the fact that they're upsetting their daughter and that their daughter is scared that, some boogeyman killer is going to jump out of the walls and get her, where it's, really her parents that are killing these people. So I thought that was well done. And I did enjoy that, the family dynamics part of the book, at least that aspect of it. There were a couple other things that were pretty interesting, but would spoil the plot too much if I said it. Needless to say, one of the big twists, like I would say the first big twist you find out is a good one. I really enjoyed that one. And I believe that's the Mr. and Mrs. Smith twist that they talk about when describing this book. I will say, a lot of people have said it's like Dexter meets Mr. and Mrs. Smith. And I didn't necessarily agree with that. Dexter, I can see where people get that it's Dexter-ish, but I didn't get those vibes. Because Dexter was a fairly relatable, good character in the show at least. Maybe not so much in the books, and if you're comparing it to the book Dexter, maybe I don't have a leg to stand on here. But I wasn't getting that same Dexter vibe that I was hoping for, like a serial killer that I could relate to, appreciate, and that I could kind of get behind. Not that serial killing is okay, it's not, but I didn't find this couple as sympathetic as I did Dexter. Some of the things that didn't work for me, and again, I'm going to have to be really vague because I don't want to spoil it. I didn't think the wife's story arc worked. I just don't think it worked for a lot of reasons. I also was not very impressed by the end of the book for a lot of reasons. And throughout the early beginning of the book, I found myself bored a lot. A lot of the book, not much is going on. The other thing, and this is a small complaint, is where the couple was in their killing relationship, where they were in their serial killer relationship. That didn't really work for me either. So there was a lot in this book that it wasn't bad. It was okay. It was not something that I thought was worth the hype that it had been given. And I was really disappointed in it. It wasn't awful. And there were some cool things that the author did, but there was a lot more, I would say, for me that didn't work, especially about some of the big reveals at the end. Like a couple of the reveals, I'm like, oh, this is cool. That's neat. But then some of the reveals, I was like, I just don't feel like that was led up to properly for me to believe that. I don't know. It didn't work for me. So 3 stars, but I was super disappointed in that one because I thought that was going to be a way more loved read than it was. All right, so my 4th star of the month is Mrs. Poe. This book was sent to me a long, long time ago by the author for a review, and I totally didn't get around to actually reading and reviewing it. I gave it a 4 star, and it's a good book. It's not really a thriller. I kind of thought it was a thriller going into it based on some of the information at the back. So the author has taken information from the history of Edgar Allan Poe, and apparently the people who study Poe are kind of divided on whether Poe had an affair or not. Whether he had a very platonic relationship with a woman that they wrote some flirtatious poetry to each other, or whether he was having a bit of an affair with the woman in this book, whose name is Frances Osgood. But this author makes the assumption that they were having an affair. She takes a lot of information from history and that we know about Poe, and this character, who is also an author, Frances Osgood, was also an author. And she has them having this love affair that, again, may or may not have happened. And Mrs. Poe finds out and starts befriending Frances, and then some bad, scary stuff starts happening in Frances' house, and she starts wondering if Mrs. Poe has it in for her. So there was a lot of cool stuff in this book. There was things I didn't like, but a lot of them were historically accurate from what I was reading. So I had to be like, well, I wouldn't have chosen that for a fiction story, but since you have to work within the confines of like what history says, I thought that a lot of the flaws were more like things that were less interesting because it was based on history than actual flaws in the storytelling. It brought some good questions up. It was interesting. It's a little sad because at the end they tell you basically like historically what happened to everybody. And let's just say it's a historical book. There are no happy endings. There's really no happy endings. And that was kind of heartbreaking to me. But it was a good read, worth it, especially if you love Poe. I thought this was a really interesting look at another side of Poe and not the side we usually see. I had in high school learned that Poe, had lost his mother young and had married his cousin and was like really in love with her, and she was sick and died, and that it really messed him up. And this novel has those elements, but it definitely goes farther and goes deeper, and it was really interesting. So it was worth a read. I enjoyed it. All right. So now for my 5-star of the month. And this book just came out, okay? It just came out on April 30th, so it's very new. This I was also sent by the publisher for an honest review. And here's the thing. This book ticks all my boxes. So I loved it. I had a wonderful time with it. I did cry, but I didn't cry for the reasons you might assume based on what this book is about. So this book has a little bit of magic maybe in it. There's a little boy that has CF, which is cystic fibrosis, and his mother works at the animal shelter. She's a veterinarian there. And he's been begging for years to get a dog, and his mother keeps telling him no for multiple reasons. She's a single mom. They live in an apartment that really doesn't allow dogs. There's a lot of good reasons for them not to get a dog. Then Whistler shows up. And Whistler is this dog that has clearly been abused. He's clearly been through a lot. And the boy, Jasper, he and this dog connect. And it is like, he feels like he can kind of telepathically communicate with this dog. Like, not the way you and I would think of telepathic communication. Not like I'm hearing your thoughts type thing. But like, he gets feelings and impressions that he believes come from this dog. So he has this really intense instant connection with this dog. And he keeps begging his mom to let him have this dog. And of course she keeps saying, we can't have this dog for a lot of reasons, because you're sick and because of, all these stuff. And of course the dog is at the pound and they have a 14-day window before he'd have to be put to sleep. And, he is obviously abused, obviously older, obviously has been through a lot of crap, and so Jasper is really worried that this dog is not going to be adoptable. It was really good. It was really emotional. Again, kids and their dogs, and especially the deep connections with the dogs, that is really right in my box. Like, I love dogs, and I love books about human connections with dogs, and this, it was so good. It was an excellent book, and I can't really tell you why it was good without spoiling it, so if you want to know more about why it was good, I'm going to be doing a separate review on this one as well. And one thing I will say without spoiling it is that I know a lot of people worry about reading these books because how they typically end. The sad things that typically happen and that you might assume happen from the context of this book. I didn't feel like I don't think you need to worry. If you want to read this book, I wouldn't worry about that. I don't want to spoil it, and I don't want to say what does or doesn't happen, but this book is worth the read, and yes, you will cry, and yes, your heart will be broken, but not necessarily in the way these books typically do. This is not an Old Yeller, and this is not a Red Fern Grows type book, okay? It's not that type of book. So if you're worried about that being an issue, go ahead and read it. It's fine. There is an epilogue in the book that I wasn't in love with. There were a couple things that were cute about it and a couple things that really worked, but I could have done without the epilogue. I understand why they put it in. It was interesting. It wasn't bad, but I could have gone without it. So, yes, The Wonder of Lost Causes. Again, it's so hard not to spoil this by anything I say, but it was so good. You should really, if you think you might be interested, you might want to check out my full review because I'm going to go into a lot of the things that are slightly spoilery that I did love. But if you love boys and their dogs, this is an amazing book. It was so good. I cannot recommend it enough. If dogs and their human relationships with people, if dogs and their relationships with their humans are your thing and what just makes you like, oh, this is for you. It was amazing. All right, guys, so that is what I have for you this month. What did you read this month? What was your best read of the month, and what was your worst read of the month? Did you have any big disappointments in there like I did? Also, have you read any of the books that I mentioned, and did you like them? Where were you on that spectrum of, oh, they were amazing, to, meh, they were just okay? My social media is below, as is the like and subscribe button, and I hope to see you next time. Thanks. Bye.